So I don't know if you noticed, but some people are expanding themselves. Not in that way, Larry. Thank you to Lisa for playing keyboard this morning. That was wonderful. So happy Father's Day. For different people have different energy around Father's Day. And this talk is part of our series on accountability. So we are accountable for how we're going to respond to Father's Day. Imagine that. We get to be accountable for our lives and what we're doing. I feel a little compelled to give you some history of Father's Day, since I gave you history of Mother's Day and history of Memorial Day. So let me do this and tell you some of the history of Father's Day. Mother's Day, started in 1850. So it wasn't until later that it started getting recognized, but early 1900s. And in 1910, Mother's Day actually officially, they say, started in 1908. But 1910, 2 years later, a lady named Sonora Dodd, who was 27 at the time, was listening to a Mother's Day talk at church. And she said, if we have Mother's Day, we should have Father's Day as well. Turnabout, fair play, is that what you say? And so she set out to try to have a Father's Day. The reason it really spoke to her was that she was one of 6 children. Her mother died giving birth to the 6th child. And so her father raised all 6 children himself. He had not remarried, and he was raising the children himself. And she looked at what a good job her father had done and said, we should recognize fathers here. I want to recognize my father. Now, most men don't like to have a whole lot of recognition. And, men aren't typically into flowers and candy and little cards like mothers would be for Mother's Day. You remember the Mother's Day story and how that took off because all the commercial people got behind it? Not so much for Father's Day. So it didn't really go over very well. Now in 1924, President Calvin Coolidge said, how about this? We should have a Father's Day because it would establish more intimate relationships between fathers and their children and impress upon fathers the full measure of their obligations. Doesn't sound particularly joyful, does it? You should have the full measure of your obligations. So I think some people probably ran away from that. Didn't really create a lot of holiday. It wasn't until World War II when the holiday started picking up a little more because of all the fathers that were gone to war. And children and wives and mothers wanted to honor them and what they were doing for our country. So during World War II, it started gaining some traction here. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson declared that Father's Day will be in June on the 3rd Sunday. It wasn't until a few years later, 1972, the President Richard Nixon had this declared a federal holiday. So it took it a lot longer than Mother's Day to get traction, but we do have Father's Day now. So happy Father's Day. And what I would like to say, if you go back one slide, this is the whole purpose of my talk today. Is really to know that there is that Father within all of us, whether you're male, female, or somewhere in between. There is that masculine energy, just like there's the feminine energy in us. And we get the chance to heal or to celebrate whatever that looked like in the past and move forward into the present, fathering ourselves. nurturing ourselves. And I love this picture when I found it, so I had to figure out a place to put it. So there it is. Okay, now you can go ahead 2 slides, and I'll tell you what the definition of a father is. When I looked at Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it defines a father as a male parent, a priest of the regular clergy. I wonder what the irregular clergy is. Also, one that originates, or a person who invents or begins something. And that would be like the father of modern science, the father of our country, something like that. But when I looked at that definition, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This goes right with my talk because I'm trying to get us to see that we all have that father within us. And so, one that originates, or a person that invents or begins something. Don't we all originate things like every day? We're creating our lives. Every day we're beginning something new. It's our choice. We are always at choice of how we're going to live our life. And so if that is the definition of father, then we're fathering ourselves. We're fathering our thoughts and our ideas. How about that? So I put on here that we all have qualities to father. Ideas, passions, inventions. And how do we want to live our life? We get to birth those ideas. The role of father seems to be centered around relationships. And I'm sure that we all have our own different feelings about that relationship with our father. Some of us had an absent relationship. The father wasn't there. Some of us had a very good relationship. We were the apple of our father's eye. Some of us were kind of somewhere in the middle there. My father was not particularly a nurturing man. Actually, he wasn't a nurturing man at all. And he was pretty absent in all of our lives. I had 5 brothers and sisters, and so my father really wasn't around for us. He taught high school wood shop, and he was always at the school working on cutting out pieces for projects. He did wonderful things with those boys. Girls didn't take wood shop at the time. He wouldn't let them. But he wouldn't let my brothers and I take wood shop either. And the kids did such neat things in his wood shop. They weren't just building birdhouses. They actually built a replica of a house so that he could teach them how to lay the subfloors, how to do the foundation, how to do the framing. He taught these kids all of this. It was life skills. He didn't even teach me how to nail a nail straight. And when I got my first house and I had a problem and I called him, he got very irritated with me because I didn't know the different tools he was saying that I should have there. Well, I don't know what that is. And then he was upset when he came to visit one time because I had this little hammer with this little ball thing on the end of it because it was the cheapest one I could find. And he's like, nobody gets this kind of hammer. What the hell are you doing with this? I didn't know because he never taught me. But what I learned years later was my father, although he wasn't showing love to us like I thought he should or could, he was in his way because the only thing he knew to do, he was living in such fear that he would not be able to support his 6 children and his wife, that he was working all the time, trying to make money, trying to support us. And that was his way of loving us. Well, that's pretty good if somebody's trying to support you, right? But it didn't fit with what I thought a father should be. And so it took me years to figure that out and to heal that relationship. Now I'll fast forward and tell you that when Tom and I got together, it was 33 years ago, but when he went to visit my father hugged him when we left. My father had never hugged me. I'm like, honey, he loves you, he doesn't love me. And think it was just that era of men, and they didn't show affection. But what I found out was when he hugged Tom, he said, "You take care of Rick for us." So he may not have been the father that I was looking for throughout my life, but he certainly had his way of loving. And I bet that many of you have fathers that didn't meet your expectation maybe, but they were doing the best they could, and they really were trying to love you. So today I want to talk about the Father within, because we can't do anything about the past. Oh yes, we can work on healing that and looking at it with new eyes, seeing it differently. But when we look at the Father within us, that part that originates things, that creates, that builds, that's in all of us, right? And so we get the choice to go ahead and create the life that we want. It's important that we check in and see what is our belief system here. Do we think that fathers can only play one role, can only show up one way in life? So a way to look at your belief system is to think about some of these things that you might come across in your life. A stay-at-home dad who takes care of the kids while the mother works. How does that make you feel? Is there something in you that says, that's not right? That's a race belief. That's a race belief that's trying to say, this is not the role fathers should play. Do we want to buy into that? I think most people that come here to this center have kind of gotten past a lot of that race belief. I hope we have. To expand our minds. What about the dad who does most of the cooking? I have a friend that this is what happens in their house. Doug and Tracy. You know him, Mary and Larry. Doug is a professional chef, and he does a lot of catering. And so it's easier for him to do the cooking. And his wife has a job that is long hours, and so she's very grateful. He also has a job that's very flexible because he does sales for a physical therapy company. And so he can pick the kids up from school and take them to this practice and that practice. And while he probably would bristle a little if we called him Mr. Mom, he really does a lot of things that, typically people would say would be a woman's role. But I love it when people can flex that way, that we're not so stringent that we have to be in a certain role, in a certain way. Some of you might say, well, this sounds pretty good. I'll let my husband do that. But then think about, over time, would you say, honey, you really shouldn't be doing that? That goes back to race belief and how deeply ingrained that can be in us. Fathers can be very nurturing. Even in their typical father role, can be nurturing and should be nurturing. I know we should on one another. But what about teaching a child to fish? Teaching them to ride a bike? To build a birdhouse? What about helping the child build that soapbox derby car? Those can be very nurturing things for a father to do. Fathers do come in all shapes and sizes, in all temperaments and dispositions. But if we don't limit ourselves thinking that fathers have to fit into one mold, then we can see a much broader and expanded life. We can help people enjoy life in ways that they never thought they could enjoy it before. So it's up to us to tap into that Father within each of us so that we present ourselves to the world, that we create the life that we want to see and the nurturing that we need to get past all of our hang-ups, all of our false beliefs, the things that no longer serve us. Ernest Holmes said, As much life as one can conceive will become part of his experience. So the more we can open ourselves up to an expanded view, the more life we can experience. And I love to experience more life. And I love it when you can do that. So our example here, I would say, is our Heavenly Father. The nature of God, Spirit, the universe, is really creating, healing, and nurturing. Do you know that some of the animal species, it's the male that sits on the nest? In other species, it's the male that goes out and gets the food and brings it back for the young. So we don't have to think, as humans, we know how to do this. And then we put people into different roles. It's in nature for all of us to have times to be nurturing. In our reading today from Science of Mind magazine, there is one Father. Clyde read this to us. There is one Father of all. This one Father conceiving within himself. Conceiving. That's something you usually say for a woman, right? Now we're saying it for God. Conceiving within himself gives birth to all the divine ideas. The sum total of these ideas constitutes the mystic Christ. Christ is spirit in expression, in manifest form. In other words, us as humans. We are the Christ as we allow spirit to be expressed through our lives. The sentence before this in the textbook says, as the human gives way to the divine in a person, he becomes the Christ. So as we allow God to express through us, we become that manifestation of God on earth. The Heavenly Father is the expression that each of us can give as we open ourselves to that. How wonderful. How wonderful that we get to express Spirit here. And we don't have to worry about what other people are going to think. Because we're only responsible for ourselves. How we're showing up in the world. And what you think about me doesn't really matter. It's what I think about myself that's going to direct my life. And that's the same for each one of you. When we understand the concept that everything is spirit, that all form in spirit is a physical manifestation, then we can embrace our unity with the whole. And when we embrace our unity with the whole, we have more life. If you're looking at how you can get past race beliefs here, if you're looking at how can you really express spirit, watch children. Because children, before we have taken the time and the energy, what's the word I want to say, to corrupt them into our beliefs, they come from spirit. And so they love that. And they know that they can express spirit in so many ways. So I want to share a story with you that some no doubt will know. This is the story about the Golden Rule School of Hope and their summer event. Now, this was in a small town, and so the Golden Rule School did their summer event, and this was a school that had basically anybody with handicaps there. Mental or physical challenges were all of these students. And so this was kind of a Special Olympics type event in the summer, and the kids worked all year on this. It allowed them to have exercise. Some of them even went on a diet. Some of them were trained so that they could do what it is that they wanted to do. What was their passion? And they got the opportunity to do that in a regular school they would never have had that opportunity. Now, at this summer event were all of the people from the town. You had the parents and you had the grandparents. You had the mayor, you had the city council, and you had a lot of the leading business people. Because you see, no one in this town was willing to give up a customer's dollar or to risk losing a citizen's vote because they weren't at the summer event. Now, what was missing from this event was all the excitement that we typically have with a sporting event at most schools. And so when you looked at the grandstands, the parents and the grandparents and the mayor and the city council were talking on their cell phones. They were text messaging people. They were reading books on their Kindle. They were eating food out of their coolers, doing whatever they wanted to do, but they weren't really paying attention to the kids. The events were going hour by hour, each event, and the kids were winning medals, and they were getting ribbons, and they were getting trophies. And finally, at the end of the day, the final event, people were ready. This meant that they could finally go home. They could go shopping, they could go fishing, they could go do whatever they wanted to do. And this final event was for all the kids that didn't have a ribbon, a trophy, or a medal from some other event. There were 6 children in the event. And so the sheriff shot the starting gun, and the kids started out with a great burst of enthusiasm, let's say. And they started down the track. And as they were going, the worst, most severely deformed boy stumbled and stumbled and stumbled again, and then he teetered and he fell onto the ground. And as he hit the ground, he wailed out. And it caused all the other kids that were running to turn around and to look at him. And when they saw that he had fallen, one little girl turned around and went running back to help him. Then a couple others started going back to help. All 5 of them went back and helped. The 2 biggest boys picked him up off the ground. The little girl with Down syndrome, she kissed his skinned arm. Another boy took his shirt and wiped blood off of the one that had fallen. And one little girl said, "Do you still want to finish the race? Do you want to win the race?" And he shook his head yes. And so the biggest boys got on either side of him and held him up. The little girls hooked arms with the boys, and as a single unit, they made it down the track. They crossed the finish line together. And when the people in the stands saw what was going on, and they saw them cross together as a unit, they stood and clapped. They clapped and clapped and clapped until their hands hurt. They yelled and cheered until their voices were hoarse. And I can tell you that those people that left the stands that day were not the same people that came in. Their lives had been changed because they allowed that spirit within them to open up. They allowed their hearts to come forward. Now, when you think about this, there is not a high school, a college, a pro team, or an Olympic athlete that I think would ever turn around and let compassion for one of his competitors or her competitors rule over their selfish desire to win. So what can we learn from looking at these children? We say, and especially men, it's winning at all costs. You know, we always have that goal in mind. We want our children to win. We want to win. But sometimes it's when we do it together that our lives are expanded, our hearts are opened, and we find a much richer and a better life than that goal of just winning the race. Some people would say, well, that kind of stuff, that's only for people that aren't right. Do you know somebody who's not right? People that aren't right, those are the ones who will turn the other cheek. They're the ones who will go the second mile. The people that will forgive others that hurt them. They're the people who give everything when they're asked. So as we contemplate the Father within us, the nurturing and loving and providing for our own souls, we can know that our life will be expanded. Our life will be encouraged as we allow that Father within to be expressed. For it is Spirit expressing. Yes to Love sang right before the talk. You raise me up. That's the Father within. That's our spirit within. That's raising us up to stand on mountains. That's raising us up to more than we thought we could be. Because that's how life manifests when we open ourselves up in new ways. Are you willing to open your mind and your heart to a different way of living and of showing up in the world? To let the Father within show up in your life. I want to close with this quote. You don't have to be your father unless he is who you want to be. You don't have to be your father's father's father, or even your grandfather's father on your mother's side. You may inherit their chins, their shoulders, their eyes, their hair, but you are not destined to become the person except the one that you want to become. You are not destined to live their lives. So if you inherit something, inherit their strength, inherit their resilience, because the only person you're destined to become is the person you decide to be. Happy Father's Day. Let us pray. There is one power, one presence, that spirit, that life, that creative force within each of us. And we are one with it. And as we recognize that within ourselves, our minds are opened and our hearts are expanded. And we step into the realization that we get to father ourselves, to conceive and give birth to the very life that we want to give, that we want to be, for how we want to show up in the world. And so we're grateful for this Father's Day. We're grateful for the fathers and the relationships that we've had and still have. And we know that it's up to us to choose to be the kind of person in the world that expresses love, peace, enthusiasm, and joy. And that comes from the Father within all of us. We're grateful for this truth. I release my word, and together we say, and so it is.